All right, welcome back. Now, starting with the African Union has called for a regional five-nation force of 7,500 troops to defeat the horrendous rise of the Nigerian armed group Boko Haram. Neighbors Nigeria, Cameroon, Niger, Chad and Benin agreed earlier this month to call on the African Union, AU, to seek a UN Security Council support for their plan to take on insurgents who were fighting to create an Islamic state in northern Nigeria. But watching Human Rights this morning urged the Chadian-led multinational force to protect civilian and prisoners' rights or else face a stronger Boko Haram. The regional force needs concrete measures to make sure civilians in the region are protected, along with the hundreds of abductees and child soldiers. But how can these forces deal with such a situation? Joining me this morning to discuss this critical issue is Lionel Rawlins, security consultant of the American University of Nigeria. You're welcome on the show this morning.
Good morning. Jam Bandu.
Jam. No, Sare?
Jam.
Good.
Jam.
And now, of course, this is a very sensitive topic we are going to discuss this morning and very vital for the territorial integrity of Nigeria. But looking at it this way, is this the last hope now? Do you see it as the last phase, the last step to crushing the Boko Haram sect?
Well, you can't really determine if it is the last, because if it fails, there are other measures that could be taken and put in place. However, it is a very good step, a very good measure, and it should be applauded and supported by all of the countries that are affected in the region, by the Nigerian people, and so much so by the government. And I'm hearing that there are some kind of discussions and undertones regarding the coalition being put together. But it's a good step. It's a good step in the right direction, and I support it, and everyone should support it.
Now, it's a good step to the right direction, but looking at it now, that the multi-regional forces should be led by Chad, isn't it? Why Chad leading the troop?
Well, I don't think they've decided that as yet, but I think Chad wants to be able to lead the troops. There's a reason for that. It's because the Chadians feel as if they're more effective. Militarily, they have about 20,000 troops, but their country is so small, so much smaller than Nigeria, that they have more troops per capita in terms of people and size. Plus, the Chadians were just recently involved in the war in Mali, and as a matter of fact, they call them desert rats, desert experts and stuff like that. And quite frankly, they've led a pretty tough fight and are known to be warriors. And that's why they would want to capitalize and get the command and control in Chad. For Nigeria, I would say, if I were Nigerian, I would say, no, I would want to be in charge of it as well. But the Nigerian military has demonstrated a few lapses here and there, which the Chadians are now capitalizing on. So if I were the Nigerians, I would say, no, I would want to be in charge.
Yeah, sure. Okay, but could it be the reason because Nigeria actually has been the one that suffered the blow the most from the dreaded Boko Haram sect, and because of the inability to have curtailed these insurgents before now, and the Chadians decided to take over the leadership? Could that be the reason?
Not really. It's a Nigerian problem, and it started in Nigeria. The Boko Haram problem started here. They've killed more Nigerians than anybody else. So what I believe is happening is the Nigerian government or the Nigerian military it could be embarrassing for them to turn over the problem to the Chadians, because if the problem started here, now that it's going regional, it means that Nigeria allowed it to get out of control, and it's affecting the entire West African region. And if it did that, it can expand into other places. So I think more so for national pride, the Nigerians would want to demand that they're the ones to be in charge of command and control. I would want to do that if I were Nigerian.
Yeah, but of course the Nigerian military have been working hard before now, and if it so happened that even in the midst of their dexterity as professionals and working hard, and now while the nation goes to the climax of crushing the insurgents, don't you think it's going to demoralize them if the leadership of this regional troop is not actually saddled on them?
Of course, it's demoralizing and embarrassing for some. Again, the problem started here. The problem belongs to Nigeria. Nigeria allowed it to affect the region and other parts of the country, which means it went international. So it is up to the Nigerians to fix the problem. And Chad and Cameroon and Niger and Benin now, that I'm hearing who's coming in, the only reason that they will get involved is not so much to help Nigeria, but to protect their country from being invaded by Boko Haram. It's not, they don't really care about Nigeria that much, it's about their country. So they will be fighting to prevent the exportation of terrorism and violence and insurgency from Nigeria into their shores. So it is up to Nigeria to seize control of the command and control element and be the leaders. But they must do it well and do it effectively, otherwise the rest of the world will just look back and laugh.
But could it be that there were actually some things the Nigerian troops were not doing, you know, with regards to when it comes to synergy and tactical maneuvers, particularly in the battlefield?
Well, that's a very good statement and question. But you see, they were doing good. Every now and then they will do very well, and then there would be a lapse in strategy or tactics. And whenever there was a lapse, it would make the Nigerian military look bad. For example, people running away with Boko Haram, chasing them, and they're dropping their weapons and running. And it's been filmed and broadcast all over the world. That is a bad thing. But for the majority of Nigerian soldiers, they're doing a fine job.
Certainly.
And because if they were not doing a fantastic job, the whole Northeast would have been overran. It's just that right now they need to be able to get the support of the region. And nothing is better than teamwork. And if these people work as a team, they can in fact deal a heavy blow to Boko Haram. If, however, they believe it's going to end in 6 weeks, just before the elections, I'm very doubtful that they can do that.
All right. Now, well, I'm not trying to push it into United States stuff now, but before now, when the few soldiers, U.S. Marine, came into the country with regards to fighting the insurgents, they say they will not have an intelligence gathering with Nigerian military because of the lapses they spotted, you know. But with this current emergence of the regional forces now, what do you make of intelligence gathering now? If they decide to exclude Nigerian military, you know, with regards to disseminating information, will that be a successful operation?
No, you can't exclude them, but then there are reasons for that. So it's not a very good statement. France has supplied some reconnaissance, aerial reconnaissance, and it's in Chad. And it's fantastic. They have drones there as well. The United States and Britain also have military surveillance and intelligence gathering apparatus in Chad right now, which can be used in the fight against Boko Haram. What they are afraid of is that if they were to gather this intelligence and they were supposed to give it to the Nigerian military or government, that somehow it's going to end up in the hands of the Boko Haram insurgents. And then it will endanger the lives of other people. So they don't, it comes down to trust. Do we trust that if I give you the information that it will be that you will keep it or you will give it away to somebody.
I like the word or the phrase trust now. Now, before now, there has been these allegations that, of course, the predominant members in the Boko Haram sects are actually Chadians. And now that this collaboration with the regional forces and Chad making the lead or taking the lead of these regional forces, don't you see any infringement that will come thereafter? Do you see Nigeria trusting the Chadian government because of the allegations earlier on of their involvement in this fracas?
Yes, I've heard that many times, but there's nothing to prove. They don't have any proof that that the Chadian government is involved with the Boko Haram recruitment or the Boko Haram assault or attacks on Nigeria. It's just speculation, and in Nigeria people love to make up stuff.
Yeah, sure. But aside speculation, of course, those who had a face-to-face encounter with some of them, they can really attest to the fact that they are Chadians. And with the incident that happened in Mubi, most of the miscreant and the looting and the stealing actually, they say, was circumvented to Chad. So how do you make of this? What do you make out of this now?
Because Boko Haram go to these different countries and recruit. They have people from Nigeria who is in Boko Haram. There are Cameroonians who is in Boko Haram. There are people from Central African Republic in Boko Haram. There are Arabs who are in Boko Haram. So it doesn't mean that the government is involved. It means that they're recruiting whoever they can from wherever they can. But I will say this. If the Chadian government was involved in the insurgency, the French government would never supply them with that amount of weaponry, would not have put a headquarters there, would not have given them the drones and the planes and the jets and the ground forces, because France doesn't want to do that.
I still have a problem with Chad. Well, I don't have a problem with France, but I have a problem with Chad. Sometimes ago, Chad withdrew a military from Baga, and few hours after the withdrawal, there was a strike. The Boko Haram invaded that region. So don't you see a common flagged foul play in the whole scenario?
No, you have to look at the...
Yeah, and that was also a joint task force. You remember that?
Yes.
And now we're still having another joint task force, but in a broader horizon.
But remember, too, that the Nigerian forces were in towns and villages, and they withdrew. And as soon as they withdrew, these towns and villages were attacked. It even happened in Cameroon, on the Cameroonian border, where the Cameroonians were there and they withdrew. And when they withdrew, the Boko Haram was able to attack. What that tells me is it's not the military forces. What it tells me is that Boko Haram has infiltrated all of these forces, and they know when they're coming and they know when they're going. They know when they're withdrawing and they know when to attack.
All right, there is more to talk on this very topic. When we return, we'll look at the Human Rights Watch, particularly on abuse on civilians and the absolute rules of engagement. We'll talk about that more when we return from break. All right, we go on a short break now. When we return, the discussion continues. Do stay with us. Welcome back. If you have just joined us, you're watching Safiya Breakfast Show, and the focus this morning is the readiness of the regional troop to combat the dreaded Boko Haram sect. And I have with me in the studio Lionel Rawlins, security consultant, AUN. Now, before the break, I said we're going to look at the Human Rights Watch because of certain the rules of engagement that shouldn't be truncated. However, let's also reflect on the regional forces. Now, I believe it is part of ECOMOG. Now we know that ECOMOG had been in various peacekeeping mission, and we can't say they succeed 100%. It was a half full. The cup was half full and also half empty. But do you see that a replica of that happening now, even with these regional forces? Is it a different approach to an issue?
Well, of course, you can't just assemble these forces, a French-speaking group of men, English-speaking group of people who are trained by the French, some trained by the British, some trained by the Americans, even some trained by the Russians, put them together and expect them to put up a gallant fight. First of all, they don't understand each other. There's no command and control. There's no training. What is your communication? What is the funding? Who's funding who and doing? So when everybody's rushing to put these regional forces together, they seem to forget that there's a lot of things in the background that needs intelligence gathering, logistics, let's say communication.
That's right.
Training. Who is going to do special forces? Who's going to transport? Who's going to back up whom? And these are the things they need to get together and determine. That is why your command and control structure must be in place even long before these people come together to determine who is in control, who is in charge, who is going to call the shots, and who is going to perform the strategies and the tactics. And these things are what people don't think about. You can't just put all these people together. It's like taking a football team of some South African, some from Ghana, some from Sierra Leone, some from Nigeria, and expect them to go and perform effectively from the jump start. It does not work like that. They have to train, plan, and carry out and implement their plans accordingly. So that is why I know you try to make it sound nicely when you said it half full, but essentially it was a failure. And if they were to do it the same way, it will still be another failure. If
they will still do it the same way. Now, of course, having an Anglophone troops as well as Francophone, now combining them together, what will be the synergy? We know that, just like you said earlier on, that there are distinctions in their training. Some were trained by Russians, Americans, and stuff like that. But what will be the connecting rod now, the synergy for them to operate in a cohesion, in a cohesive approach?
That's a very good question. First of all, they have to come together as one, and they have to understand what is the mission. You must have, in everything you do, you must have a mission statement.
Mission should be defined.
What is your mission? Define your mission. What are we going to accomplish? What are we trying to do? And once you define that, then you start going down from the planning into the planning stage. How will we accomplish this mission? See, it's simple. Define your mission, then you figure out how we will accomplish the mission. Then you implement those plans. But there's some other serious things involved, because like countries like France, and who will be involved, Britain and the United States, they follow the Geneva Convention to the T. They don't fool around with the Geneva Convention. Whereas African troops, they tend to sometimes get a little heavy-handed and do things they're not supposed to do. So the United States and France and the Western countries are not going to let the Nigerians or the Chadians go and execute people because they're angry. And so things like this could cause a problem. But this is where you set it in the mission statement and implement the strategies for accomplishing those missions, which come back to human rights abuse.
All right, let's look at a bilateral relationship between some of these countries with Nigeria. Of course, we know that there are those countries that have interest, and the distinction of the interest various quarters now. Don't you see it affecting the common goal of this operation?
you know, a lot of people said the interest. I think the interest of these countries, of the Western countries, is to curtail terrorism and insurgency and stop it from being exported, because, you know, ISIS is trying to recruit and to do its thing over in Iraq, but they're also affected here. I have no doubt in my mind that Boko Haram and ISIS are connecting with each other, because Boko Haram is adopting and have adopted ISIS type of programs and strategies and tactics that they're doing in Iraq. You cannot, right now, you can't really tell the difference between ISIS and Boko Haram in everything that they're doing, except that one is dark-skinned and one is light-skinned.
But they have the same, almost the same ideology.
They have the same ideology, the same agenda, the same goals, the same ideals, and the same will to exploit these goals and ideals.
Okay, of course, before now we know that the U.S. refused to sell arms to the Nigerian military, particularly to combat these insurgents. But now we see that the UN Security Council is going to support the plan to take on the insurgents who were fighting to create an Islamic State in northern Nigeria. Now, with the inclusion or with the superseding or presiding of the UN Security Council over this issue, do you see them being influenced also by United States quota, you know, to either frustrate this success of the operation as well?
Well, not really. I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but the UN is never done anything for anyone in Africa. The UN has let down Africa ever since they were formed. Apart from, you know, giving food and giving some medication and medicine and so forth in certain African countries, the UN has been a total failure to Africa and has let down Africa. I mean, just as recently as Rwanda, just only 20 years ago. And even right now, what has the UN done in this war against terrorism right here in Nigeria? No one can say one thing that the United Nations has done. They have not done anything. So I am not banking. I'm not expecting anything from them. And if they did anything to change my opinion, it will be a surprise.
To certainly be a surprise. Now, looking at the synergy as well, before now we know that the Nigerian military had been infiltrated by the Boko Haram sect, and although we've not had any record of Cameroonian troops being infiltrated as well as the Chadian troops, but should there be this infiltration, you know, don't you see it affecting the potency of these regional forces?
Well, it can. You know, what people need the United States and the rest of the world work on a thing called a need-to-know basis. You know, when I was a Marine, there are things that they wouldn't tell me because I don't need to know. And I had a very high security clearance. But if it doesn't concern me, they wouldn't tell me. This is the stuff that you all have to start doing here. If you don't need to know, we won't tell you anything. And it comes down to, again, the word that we used earlier, trust. Because if they were supposed to give that information to the rank and file in the Nigerian force, it will be all over. And maybe the Chadians and the Cameroonians have adopted that Western system of intelligence sharing on a need-to-know basis. If you don't need to know, I don't need to tell you. You don't need to ask. Either.
No, if I don't need to know, it doesn't mean that it doesn't concern me.
Well, it does concern you if it's war and people are dying. But if it's tactical, you will know whenever the information is ready for you. But we can't tell you that next Tuesday we will go to Baga to carry out a tactical operation against the insurgents. Because if you were to get that information, you can call your friend in the insurgents, you can tell your uncle who tell his friend, and that's how they get information. And you go to Baga and you get ambushed.
All right, talking about the infiltration now, but just like you said, it's very difficult for them, for those troops to be infiltrated again because of the tactical and effective security gathering. Now, security sharing, rather. Now, let's see the watchdog human right. You know, the Chadian-led multinational task force to protect civilians and prisoners' right, or else face a stronger Boko Haram. What is the implication now? Because before now we've seen where military who go for a peace mission, you know, circumvent the main mission and then begin to abduct girls, rape, and cases like that. How do that affect effective operation?
Well, it's a bad thing because when it happens, even though you're doing something good, by liberating the country from whatever it is or freeing up the country from whatever it is you're doing, even though you're doing that, if you're raping young girls just because they are a refugee or a displaced person, or you're murdering someone in cold blood just because they are a Muslim and you think they are part of the Boko Haram group just because of their religion or their name, and people see this, it turns them off. So you're doing good things on one side, and then on the other side you're doing bad things, and the bad things always outweigh the good. No matter how good you do, just do one bad thing, and that will overshadow all the good you have done.
That's right.
So when this happens, there's a revolt from the people. And not just from the people, but the Human Rights Watch Group and all these editors of the newspapers, all these journalists, they will go out and they will paint a nasty picture of what the security forces are doing. Especially the African forces. They are well known for doing these things. Whether they're true or not, there's always nasty information coming out.
All right, let's see this critical now. We know that before now, the Human Rights Watch said Nigeria military has been the highest abusers of children, you know, and human rights. But we hear that the Boko Haram sect have started recruiting child soldiers, you know. You don't expect a young boy of 12 years old holding an AK-47 try to shoot you as a military man and you say you wouldn't drop him down, you know. So what do you make of this?
No, that's contrary to anything else. If you fight in a war, if the child is 3 years old and he's shooting at you, you can shoot the child.
You can, so that is not a human right violation,
no,
right?
You're not violating anything. You're defending yourself, and it's the rules of engagement of war.
Yeah.
The child is shooting at you. You have no time to determine whether or not he's 3 months or 30 years old. But the problem would be when you capture him as a prisoner, and you start to torture them and kill them unnecessarily, especially blatantly and in the open. That is what gets them in trouble. But it doesn't matter if a 2-year-old is shooting a gun at you. You are obliged and obligated to defend yourself.
Now, we know that most of the Boko Haram sect, during tactical operation, they run into the civilians. Now, how should the military take on these people without necessarily having a collateral damage?
Collateral damage will always happen. You cannot prevent collateral damage from happening. It's going to happen. People are going to die in war. It has from the beginning of time, even before there were bombs, even when there were bows and arrows, civilians accidentally got shot with an arrow going through their chest or their back, and they died. So nothing is going to stop civilians from getting hurt or getting killed. What matters most is that you put everything in place to protect the civilians. As long as you can prove we did everything we can to protect the civilian population, then you'll be doing well.
You know why I asked it? Because I had a problem with the incident that took place during the death of Mohammed Yusuf, the first headman of the Boko Haram sect, and a lot of police officers went into trouble because of that. But the human right didn't look at how they took on the police. But however, it's been a very good time having you on the show and talk more. We'll see you next week Monday for more. Thank you. very much, Lionel.
Allah Surah.
Allah Surah.
All right.
Well, that has been Lionel Rawlins talking to us on the readiness of the regional forces coming to Nigeria to curtail the Boko Haram sects. Now, before our next interview, hidden away in a secret London location lie treasures usually unseen on the big screen. The most famous props from some of the biggest films of the last few decades are stored in the secret vault of CNN's corporate cousin Warner Bros. CNN exclusive Max Foster was the lucky first reporter allowed inside the camera crew. Let's see that report.
Well, a very ordinary reception to a very ordinary warehouse somewhere on the outskirts of London. We're not allowed to reveal the location, and that's because it's the perfect disguise for a priceless archive. And just look at the size of it. More than 10,000 props, 3,000 costumes, iconic objects from some of the world's favourite films, all meticulously sorted and stored here in the Warner Brothers archive. So in this section, rail upon rail of costumes. Let's take a look. The Dark Knight Rises, Christian Bale as Bruce Wayne. The Harry Potter franchise is one of the most successful in movie history. And once the cameras stopped rolling, many of the props and costumes were moved here. You'll recognise the Hogwarts uniform there, and you can get a sense of how Daniel Radcliffe aged as he played Harry Potter over the years. This from the first movie, and this one from the last. More Harry Potter items, right?
Indeed, indeed. The Golden Snitch, which is used in the Quidditch scenes.
There's no magic to be used between the classes in the corridors.
And then we move on to the Dark Knight series.
And this is the gun that I recognise.
Indeed.
It's heavy, it just feels like a real gun. It's
from
unbelievable.
Batman Begins, it's the practical grapple gun.
What's that? Oh, the tumbler? Oh, you wouldn't be interested in that.
Check out the tumbler. All 2.5 tons of